Reggie here, and I want to welcome you to another one of my videos. I get asked all the time, if I had X amount of money, what would I buy? So I decided to take on that challenge and actually answer the question. If I had roughly $1,200, what comics would I consider picking up? In this video, we are going to look at 3 such books that roughly fall into that category, and I hope that you enjoy. Stay tuned. All right, so let's go ahead and take a look at a couple of examples that I'd pick up if I wanted to spend around $1,200. And the very first book that I would absolutely pick up is the one that you see on screen right now. It is almost a no-brainer. It is Amazing Spider-Man issue number 300, a book that has a lot going for it. This is one of the most homaged covers out there, period. There are so many different cover swipes of this book out there that it is really unbelievable because it is such an iconic cover by a talented artist, Todd McFarlane. This book is also the first appearance of Venom, arguably one of the more popular modern characters out there. The book was inked by Todd McFarlane, one of his first, I do believe, on Amazing Spider-Man. This is also Spider-Man's 25th anniversary issue. A lot going for this book. Almost, it doesn't matter what grade you get. It is a great book to have in one's collection. But if I had $1,200, where would I spend it? I would consider spending it here. Unfortunately, you can't get a 9.8 for that kind of money. 9.8 will run you a whole lot more money than that. But where could you go? You could go to the 9.6. Overall, there are around 27,000 copies of this book out there, blue label, graded by CGC. I would look at the 9.6. There are roughly 4,000, well, technically exactly 4,000 copies of this book on the census. But when you drill in, you realize that it's about 20% of the overall blue label total out there, which is not terrible, 20%, actually 19.9 is not terrible in any way, shape, or form. But I want to blow this up for you guys so that we can take a look at this data. This book right now is going for, on average, 30-day average of 11.58, which is not terrible, right? Well, it is within our $1,200 threshold that we've set for this exercise. The most recent sale for this book was 11.44 in July. Again, not terrible. So how do you evaluate whether this is a great book to pick up? Well, I wanted to take a look at how this book has performed. And you can see there, back in 2021, this book was going for $24.46. That is a lot of money. The reality is that we may never see that type of number again. There was a lot of stuff that was happening during the pandemic that resulted in that type of price. So if you were to compare where it is now to where it was in May of 2021, it looks like a great buy, but that's not what we should be comparing it to. So what I wanted to do was to back up to see where was it that this book landed right before the run-up, right before it started to get expensive, if you will. And it was, in my mind, in August of 2020. This book was selling then for around $995. That's a decent amount of money for a great key comic. Again, it has a lot going for it. So when you look at where it was in August of 2020, at $995 and where it is in July of 2023, you're looking at a difference of around $150, which isn't a whole lot. So if you were just to remove the pandemic blip from this book, what you would be left wondering is where the book now where it would have been normally had the pandemic effect not occurred? And one might be able to say, yeah, right. $150 increase if you were to remove the pandemic effects is not terrible. Could the book go down a little bit more? Maybe. I honestly don't know. But when you compare it to where it was before the run up to where it is now, it does not look like a bad book to actually pick up. And let's look at the more recent sales. Let's see if we can pull it up. Again, all this data is actually coming from Go Collect. You can see some of those individual sales. The book was selling in, what is that? And yeah, it's kind of been hovering around the $1,200 mark roughly. So again, maybe it's stabilized. Maybe this is the new baseline for this incredible key. Only time will tell whether that is the case. But if I had around $1,200, this would be a book that I would take a hard look at. And in all transparency, I do have a 9.6. It is a triple sign, but it's still a 9.6 nevertheless. A great book to pick up, Amazing Spider-Man issue number 300. So now I want to compare that book to another book that is also in the same price range, but is very different, I think. This is Marvel Spotlight issue number 5 from 1972. This book has some good stuff going for it as well. It is the first appearance of Ghost Rider, first appearance of Johnny Blaze, and a bunch of other characters in that Ghost Rider ecosystem or universe, if you will. It is also just a fantastic cover. I mean, that cover is fantastic. There is no doubt about that. Classic cover from some really talented, creative people, both in terms of the writers and also in terms of the artist as well. Now, the story is a little different for this book. It's a little different story here. There are only 5,000 copies, blue label, only 5,000 blue label copies of this comic out there. And when you drill down, I think if you were going to, again, spend around $1,200, the 6.0 might be the sweet spot for this. The 6.0 could be where you want to be. The 30-day average for this book is around $12.90, but when you start to look at some of the sales, yeah, it's still around $12.90. So maybe not the best example, but you're still in the wheelhouse, right? You're still in the wheelhouse of around $1,200 for this book. So let's blow this one up. Let's blow this one up and let's take a look at what is happening with this comic. And again, the most recent sale is $12.89, and you can see back in, where was this? This was, where is it? April of 2022. $2,700, which is a ridiculous amount of money. This book had a couple of surges here. Before that, its high water mark was 2416 in July of 2021. But if you back it up to before the explosion, before the explosion was here, December 2020. In my mind, this book was going for $835. That would have been an amazing time to pick up this comic, no doubt about it. $835, great time. If anybody had been paying attention to Ghost Rider, that would have been great. So again, when you draw a line from where it was in December of 2020, before the big run up that we just looked at, and you look at where it is now, you see a noticeable increase, right? You see a noticeable increase, but it's also an older book, right? The incline with this one is a little more steep, right, than what we saw with Amazing Spider-Man issue number 300. But where it was in December of 2020 versus where it is now is around $455, right? $455 is the run-up. Would this book have reached that mark, that number, had the pandemic not occurred? I honestly don't know. It's a great book. It's a classic cover, classic character that has a lot of potential in it. And this could be, again, a great book for people to pick up. You look at where it was, the average just a year ago was around $1,500. And right now it's sitting at around $1,290. Again, a lot of potential there, a lot of great things happening for this book. And you look at how it's performed, you can see some of the numbers. It's been hovering in that 1,100, 1,200, 13 at one point, $1,300, but not a terrible book. That being Marvel Spotlight issue number 5, the first appearance of Ghost Rider. Again, not a terrible book to be considering. So one additional book that I wanted to look at that also falls, I do believe, into this $1,200 realm is this one right here, Amazing Spider-Man issue number 5 from 1963, an older book versus the other two that we just looked at. This is the first battle between Spider-Man and Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom is a classic character. This book is also a low number, a single-digit Amazing Spider-Man comic. Spider-Man is arguably one of the most popular characters in the entire world. You really can't go wrong with old ASM, especially from the Silver Age. Great book. an okay cover. I'm not in love with this cover. But with this one, if we were trying to stay within that $1,200 range, we would be looking at this book right here. This is a CGC 5.5, and there are even fewer copies of this book on the census. There are 2,700 universal blue label copies, of which the 5.5 represents 34.2% of those copies. And if you look at where the book is performing, it's around $12.59. It's within striking distance of the goal of $1,200. Even the 1 year for this book is around $16.10. And if we back up to see where the high water marks for this book were, it was in May of 2022 at $27.50, and backing up from that, $29.50 in January of 2022. And there was another little spike here at $2,500 in September of 2021. And if you really just, if you zoom out on this book, you can see that if you go back in time, this book has had a few blips in value. If you go back to 2019, this book was a $1,000 book back then. Backing up even a little bit more, in 2018, this book was a $1,000 book. Now, fast forward to where it is right now at $1,259. You're talking about a $180 difference versus where this book has been, right? If you take out, again, the pandemic effect and you look at basically where this book has been, 2018, 2019, roughly $1,000, now $1,260. You could ask yourself, is this where this book would have naturally gone on its own had it not been for the pandemic? Potentially. Low number ASM for around $1,200, featuring two incredibly popular characters, one hero and one villain in Doctor Doom. Again, incredibly popular characters. Is this a book that you should pick up? At the end of the day, I cannot answer that question, but I thought that this was a fun exercise to look at. Part of the reason why I wanted to do this is because I actually had somebody reach out to me that was debating between Marvel Spotlight and ASM issue number 5. And they were like, if you were making this decision, which would you pick? I thought it was a cool exercise to maybe present that to you all, to say, hey, if you're thinking about getting a book for around $1,200, here is 3 that you could consider. And they all look different from one another, but they're all amazing books, no doubt about it. If this video series or if this video is one that you enjoy, I want to encourage you to go ahead and hit the thumbs up button. If there's enough people to watch it, enough people to give it the thumbs up, maybe this is something that we will continue to do, to spotlight books that fall within roughly a certain price range, and maybe we'll do it more. We'll have to see how this plays out. If you want to reach out to me, feel free to do so on Instagram at Regie Collects. Take care.
This thing on? Mic check. I just want to make sure y'all can hear me clearly. Yo, should you practice art, or should art be your practice? I had a question, so I asked it. Not to anyone specifically, but to my inner God, you know? The one that's gonna be a master, the one that's more than a rapper, the one that's an educator, the one that seeks enlightenment. He travels with concepts, he's got the mindset expansive. He understands that his time combined with travel and concepts makes his mind convex. Sort of like when you look at a brain scan, straight off meditation, we was concaving until we had that eternal dialogue that created our dialect. Now we in distinct rooms with pure souls having them conversations. Synergy and combinations, you fly and we waiting. Indian style in the gold.